Hey, welcome back to the City Rev Life Podcast. We are continuing our series on self-sacrifice. My name is Josh, joined here with Pastor Robey. And Pastor, why don't you go ahead and catch us up? Where have we been through the first three parts?
Thank you, Pastor. I will do that. I'm just going to make fun of every way you introduce.
Every intro.
Introduction I'm going to make fun of.
Okay, you've been joining us through this series.
You're also a pastor.
You know, I've just been taking a beating through this. I've been
it's fun.
Demonstrating self-sacrifice by being on this podcast with you.
And that was my intention. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to model this.
Thank you so much.
Yes. No, we are walking through this series on self-sacrifice. What are we talking about here? At the core of the Christian faith is this idea of self-sacrifice. Obviously, Christ laid down his life for us. That is our only way we can be saved. He paid for our sin as the ultimate sacrifice, rose again from the dead, and our faith in him, in his sacrifice, which is really unimaginable. Like, the story of the gospel is so profound and set apart from any other idea. It's that God himself sacrificed himself for us, his creation. Like, that's like, what an unbelievable story. Is like, here's the whole universe that's now been corrupted because of sin. And I mean, that's what the Bible says. The whole universe is longing for its redemption. And then God himself is the Messiah that's long awaited. And the Son of God sacrifices himself. I mean, that is a story. It's not a story of like driving to try a little harder and be a little more moral and just be more disciplined and more religious. Like, the elegant story is this unbelievable demonstration that God himself laid down his life, came as a man. The author of life, this is how it is put in Acts, I want to say chapter 2. The author of life was killed. Unbelievable, the story of the gospel. And so it shapes our life. It's the core of our faith. It's the foundation of love. We're supposed to live out lives of love. And we're told that that's the model of what love is in our relationships, is self-sacrifice. So that's what this podcast series has been about.
That's really good. I feel like that's going to take a lifetime to fully grasp the gospel.
Yes.
And that in the next life we'll experience the beauty of that.
Yes.
So walk us through that. Self-sacrifice. I think we're going to be tackling today a subject that probably most listeners will relate to. I know I certainly do. Something else that can creep up in there and drive us to a place of self-sacrifice that is unhealthy, ultimately cascades in on itself. It's not sustainable. Walk us through that.
So self-sacrifice can get complicated. So what we've been working through is defining self-sacrifice. We've talked about that self-sacrifice also includes self-care. So there is a dimension where we're expected to care for ourselves.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
As yourself. There's self-sacrifice is different than having a Messiah complex, and that can creep up on all of us. So we talked about that. But there's another thing that sometimes muddies the water with self-sacrifice, and that's people-pleasing. So, and a lot of times the challenge with this one is sometimes we're putting this on ourselves. We're people pleasers. We don't want to disappoint someone. So like, it's hard to say, like, we're asked to do something. And maybe it's a good thing, and maybe it's well-meaning, and we deal, you and I as ministry leaders, we deal with this. Like, we sometimes will ask someone to serve at church, and sometimes people, like, they don't know how to say no. And they're like, they don't want to disappoint you because you're one of their pastors, and so they're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, of course, and they don't know how to say no. And so there's people pleasing a bit. This is big in families.
Yep.
We can be people pleasing with our extended family, our parents, our grandparents, cousins, siblings. Our kids, we can be people pleasers with our kids. And, maybe you have grown kids. Maybe you're a grandparent, and you can be a people pleaser to your kids and your grandkids. We can be people pleasers at work, big time with friendships. Friends can ask us to do something, and we just don't know how to say no. We can be, but people pleasing and self-sacrifice is not the same thing.
Yep.
It's love for people, not people pleasing.
That's good.
And so the very clean dividing line between self-sacrifice and people pleasing is who's directing the self-sacrifice. Who's determining when I sacrifice? Who's determining when I lay down myself and put someone else's needs first? Who's determining that? Is it the person, or in the end, and it's somewhat it's an obvious thought, but it's not obvious in practice. It's ultimately our Lord. Jesus, when he calls us to be his disciples, he says, follow me. It's Jesus that directs our self-sacrifice. It's not other people that direct our self-sacrifice. So there's a great scripture that like makes this so dramatically explicit. And it's in Jesus' teaching in Luke 14, 26 and 27. Can you go ahead and read that, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own mother and father and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple.
It's one of those hard...
That is incredibly dramatic.
Yeah, it's very dramatic. It's one of the harder statements of Christ.
That's Jesus speaking himself.
Yeah, he says, you cannot be my disciple if you don't, I mean, this is the quote, hate your father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters in your own life.
Yeah.
So how does he say, love your neighbor as yourself? And we just already talked about in this series, a level of self-care and self-love that's appropriate. And then here he's saying hate. So a couple things. We've got to define the ancient concept of love and hate. We use love way more broadly and not as intensely as the original language.
I love pancakes.
I love pizza.
I love television.
I love the Miami Dolphins. That actually is a pretty intense love.
I love my wife.
You love your wife. Yes, and you don't love your wife as much as you love pancakes.
Right. Well, it's close.
Maybe
my
another
wife's more.
podcast.
My wife's more.
Your wife's a little more though.
Yeah. So she's above pancakes.
Melanie, I hope you're not listening to this podcast. We're sorry. No, we use love for a lot of things. Whereas when the Bible's talking about love, it's defining it like very strongly. I mean, it's very intense. Love is extreme. The definition of love, we by this we know love is what it says in 1 John, that Christ laid down his life, so we laid down our lives. So love, the original idea of love is more intense in the Bible than we use it in our normal vernacular. We love all kinds of things. And we mean, when we say love, we could mean everything from the intensity of we love our spouse and our kids to like we like certain types of food. The opposite is the word hate. So like the word, we use hate very intensely, and this is not like it's not a right or wrong thing. It's more just a language thing and how it's changed by culture. Yep. So when the Bible uses hate, it's using it more broadly. The word, or at least the Greek word here that we're translating hate, means against. It can be neglect. It can mean intensity, like despise. It has like a wider, what we would say linguistically, it has a wider semantic range in the Greek than it does in the English. The semantic range in the English is only intensity. It's like despising animosity in the English, whereas in the Greek it's a little bit more broad. And so that helps us understand what Jesus is saying. In the end, he's saying, you've got to put me, if you're going to be my disciple, I have to be so dramatically the priority in your life that everything else may be neglected to follow me. What do I mean by neglected?
He's talking about like the disparity between the two.
Yes, he's talking about disparity. Of course, Jesus doesn't want you to neglect your wife and your children, and obviously that would go against other things he's taught. But he's so dramatically the priority that everything else is a far second place. And here's the redemption of it. As we're following Jesus, he rightly prioritizes our life so that we care effectively for loving our family. Okay.
Wow.
Jesus also was very clear, honor your father and mother. He's the great, he's also modeling, he's the great groom who laid down his life for the bride. We're told that in Ephesians 5.
Right.
But here's the problem. when we put other relationships over Jesus, we actually will not love them well.
Yeah.
So if I idolize my kids more than Jesus, if I put my kids first, and that seems noble, I'll in the end like either be so like I'll either so spoil them because I'm trying to please them, or I will like have such strong expectations and I'm so driven for them to succeed that I'll kind of strangle that relationship. So like if I don't put Jesus so dramatically first, it won't rightly order my relationship with my kids. If I put my relationship with my spouse over my relationship with Jesus, so that I'm looking for my spouse to provide identity, acceptance, healing, direction, whatever it may be, love in a way that only Jesus can satisfy, I will put expectations on that spouse that they will never be able to live up to.
Right.
And because only Jesus can, I'm putting God-like expectations on that spouse. So in the end, that's leading me down a path of brokenness. Okay, I've got to so dramatically put Jesus first, then he will help me rightly organize the rest of those relationships. He will make sure that they're, as I'm following Jesus, that they're not neglected, that they're served, and that they're loved. Does this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the last week's podcast, this brings a lot of peace knowing it is in God's hand.
Yes.
Now, is it fair to say what we're actually doing there when we're seeking to please a family member, a father, a mother, a grandmother, a grandfather, a sibling, a spouse, if we're seeking to please them more than we're seeking to please God, that we're actually making an idol out of them in our hearts?
Yes, absolutely. And idols, idols are usually good things. Idols are usually, at least for us,
they fly under the radar.
Yeah, they're usually good things that we just have God-like expectations of. So we need to keep Jesus dramatically first. Okay, this then is directly related to self-sacrifice because Jesus is the one directing my self-sacrifice. It's not people-pleasing. A lot of times, if I'm putting someone else first, I'm so desperate. It could be coming from me. I'm so desperate for their approval. I'm so desperate for their respect. I so badly don't want that disappointment.
Yeah.
That I'm gonna do whatever they ask me to, even if that gets my life out of priority. Or it can come from the person. That person can be using guilt. That person can be using, can then say, wow, if you're not going to do that for me, then maybe you don't even love me anymore. Like, if you're not going to do that, then what's wrong with you? They can use guilt. They can use shame. They can punish us relationally. And sometimes that people pleasing, they're expecting us to put them first.
Right.
But we've got to follow Jesus and make and so that we're not people pleasing. And sometimes we can be people pleasing and we're not really self-sacrificing. So
that's good.
The key idea here is Jesus directs our self-sacrifice, not other people.
That's so good. What do you think about some practical ways that we can identify in our hearts that we're seeking to people please rather than please the Lord? And then maybe what are some practical ways that we can make sure that we are seeking to please God? Like, how does this play out practically?
Yeah, I think working out, here's a couple things. I think a lot of it has to do with attention. And you may be at work and your boss expects that your work is the most important part of your life. And it isn't. That the most important is your relationship with God and then your marriage.
Well, now that I've got you here, boss, I needed to talk to you about something.
Good. I hope you seek after Jesus.
I'm just kidding. You model that well.
Well, it is tricky in ministry because ministry is not the same as our relationship with Jesus, and that's confusing too. So
yeah, it gets sticky.
Yes. So for volunteers and volunteer leaders, small group leaders, volunteering at church is not the same exact thing as your relationship with Jesus. It's not the same thing. We talk about all the time, like our relationship with Jesus is first, our relationship with our spouses is second, our relationship to our kids is third, ministry comes after that. That's it's just biblical. So a lot of it has to do with prioritized. We have to have a prioritized attention according to how Jesus is directing it. This plays out for our kids, and this plays out with our kids too, and there's a valuable lesson with our kids. When our kids get to a place where they're playing sports a little bit more competitively, a lot of times the coaches are expecting the most important thing in that child's life is that sport. Wait, you're not going to the tournament? You're not going to do this thing? You're not going to be at practice every time? And so we've got to model to our kids, hey, kids, we're committed to the team. Yes, we're committed. And model, hey, setting those expectations from the beginning with the coach. Hey, coach, if there's something that's on Sunday morning, we're not going to make a lot or any of those because we go to church. Or if they're teenagers, hey, Wednesday night, coach, we're going to have to leave early on Wednesday night because it's a priority that the kids are at student ministry. I mean, think of what we're modeling to our kids with competitive sports because, I don't want the coach to be mad at me, or the coach is not going to play me, or the coach is going to cut me. And it's in the end, it's like, but we follow Jesus, not the coach.
That's good.
And so in the end, we have to make sure that we're not people pleasing because the language is never put me first. The language is, aren't you committed to the team? Aren't you committed to the company? A guilt trip. And it's again, self-sacrifice is directed by Jesus, not people pleasing. Same thing happens in family. Wait, you're not coming to the Sunday we're having an all-day event. You're not coming? Well, no. Sorry, mom and dad. Sorry, aunt and uncle. Sorry, abuela, abuelo, grandpa, grandma. Like we're not going to be there because we have this priority. Wait, you're not going to do this? What about this? What about this? No, we're actually getting away and spending time for our marriage. That's what God's directing me to do. No, we're actually I need to take a break from serving in ministry because I need to invest in my spiritual health. Or no, I can't serve in that way because I've got to make sure that I've got time for myself with the Lord, or time with the family. We've got to rightly prioritize ourselves. Self-sacrifice doesn't mean throwing our biblical priorities out, and it doesn't mean letting people decide those for us. The key principle here is Jesus directs our self-sacrifice, not other people.
That's really good. You know what we used to call people like that in our lives?
What's that?
Travel agents for guilt trips.
Oh my!
And they're like, go to a different travel agent. That's a horrible one, jokingly. But it's frustrating because you try to do the right thing. Sometimes you make the right decision, and you still feel so guilty because they make you feel guilty. And they put that on you, that expectation on you. And you're right. The coach says you're not committed to the team. Your kid's going to underperform. Your parents, you're a horrible son or daughter. You're a horrible grandchild. Do not be here. This is the one thing that we do each month where we all get together, and you're going to be the only one that's not there. And standing your ground because you know what's healthy and you have priorities, and something is just unfortunately being prioritized over this. You walk away feeling really guilty. So maybe give us a practical thing. Like how can we approach that in our own hearts after we take a stand, and maybe between ourselves and the Lord? Like how do we bring it back to Jesus? You're the one I'm seeking to please. You are the one that has set these priorities in my life. Give me peace. Like what does that look like?
And maybe I'll just wrap up with this in closing. I actually think one key practical thing comes even before that. It's setting expectations ahead of time. So that it is also, we're also people of integrity. So it's also not fair to overpromise and underdeliver. So I don't want to go into that competitive sports league promising I'm going to be there and then suddenly, say, oh, I can't, that's not my priority. I want to set the expectation ahead of time And then actually on the other end, before the Lord, I have a good conscience on what I've done. Same with family. Hey, I just want you to know, we're not going to make it on all of those because we've got church or we've got this we're doing as a family. I just want to set expectations. And then if I've been faithful and had the integrity to do that ahead of time, then like I feel better before the Lord. And same with work. Like I want to set the right expectations with my family about work. And hey, there are seasons where we got to run hard, but I want to talk through that, make sure I'm maintaining rest and the right priorities. But I also I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver at work. I want to be a person of integrity and make sure that I'm representing those priorities well. And then listen, when I'm at work or when we are at football, or whatever the sport is, soccer or volleyball or baseball, like I'm going to keep priorities, but I'm going to work hard. I'm going to be a hard worker. I'm going to work smart. And when I'm at work, I'm going to work smart. I'm going to give my best, but I'm going to, before the Lord, be a person of integrity. That's
so good. And for what it's worth too, when you take that stand, and my own experience, when I have, in those few times, been brave enough to do that, I have noticed people take note and they really respect it.
Yeah.
In most cases, family dynamics, sometimes it can be tricky, but in most cases, that coach, oh wow, like they prioritize church. No one's told me that before.
Sure.
Maybe we shouldn't have practices on Wednesday nights or Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
Like you're giving them an opportunity to address that.
Yep.
And I think they come to respect that ultimately.
Yes.
Really good. Thank you, Robey, for another great podcast, part 4 on self-sacrifice. Be sure to join us next week as we wrap up the series on Christians and self-sacrifice. See you guys then.
Thank you so much for listening to the City Rev Life Podcast. Feel free to subscribe and leave a rate and review. We love it when you share it with your friends on social media, so don't forget to tag us at cityrev.church. If you're interested in more resources, download our City Rev Church app and follow us on social media. Have a great day.